Welcome all in this lecture of biophysics. In this particular lecture, we will study that how cells manage energy and how scientists compute energy transformation. So, these lectures will be divided in some parts. This is the first part of the lecture. Living cells follow the same principle of conservation of matter and energy as do all other physical systems. So, in our physical science, we have heard about the conservation of matter, conservation of mass, conservation of energy. So, these principles also hold in the systems of biological interest, though they also operate under an additional set of constraints imposed by their evolutionary history. So, we will study them in details. Now, let us discuss about energy and life of cells. Much of the business of cellular life involves transformations of energy. Most familiar organisms make their living by eating other living or freshly dead things. So, this is quite common, and we all know about that most of the familiar organisms make their living by eating other living organisms, thereby consuming energy carrying organic molecules that have been generated and suffered by other living organisms. So, that means the organisms actually consuming energy carrying organic molecules which are generated in some other living organisms. This material transfer process makes all forms of life on earth an interconnected and interdependent web where a key mode of communication is energy transfer. So, this is very important. So, what we can learn from this fact that this is basically a material transfer process, or we can also say that an energy transfer process, and all forms of life on earth are an interconnected and interdependent web. Humans consume food made up largely of fats, proteins and carbohydrates, initially synthesized in other organisms. So, all these biomolecules, that is fats, proteins, carbohydrates, so they are basically synthesized in other organisms. And what are other organisms? It is mostly plants, animals and fungi, because we generally eat these three types of items. It is either plants or animals or fungi. We use the molecules we consume not only to create material but also to fuel the energy requiring processes of daily life, including muscle contraction, heat generation and brain activity. So, apart from the creation of material, here creation of material means that is consuming such types of biomolecules, what cells do? Cells can create other type of cells, and so that is, we can say, that is creation of material. And when other types of cells are created, basically more biomolecules are created, mostly they are in protein forms. So, other types of biomolecules are created, and we can also say that is from one cell through the process of cell division other cells are created. So, this is what about the creation of material. But apart from the creation of material, the consumed food is also used to maintain the different types of biological activities such as muscle contraction, heat generation and brain activity. Ultimately, it would not be possible for life to survive merely by recycling or exchanging energy among organisms. You see, what we have said earlier, that is, we consume plants, animals, or fungi, but if we continue to do so, it is not only for human, but as we are interconnected with other animals or plants, so basically we are in a web. So in this web, what we are actually doing, we are exchanging material or exchanging energy. But if we continue this process, what will happen, that is, in near future there will not be this energy source, because everything will be destroyed. So there must be an outside energy source, it must be there. For most ecosystems on earth, the ultimate energy source is sunlight, which is harvested by various cells in plants, in many unicellular eukaryotes, and in many kinds of bacteria. The light gathered by these cells serve not only their own energy needs, but eventually provides the energy for the remainder of the interdependent web of life. These cells exploit the energy of sunlight using an array of specialized molecules, with one of the outcomes being to transfer ions across the membranes. The ion gradients store energy in a battery like form that can then be coupled to enzymes that can, for example, convert CO2 and H2O from the air into sugar and indirectly into all other biomolecules, including proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. So what happens actually? Light is gathered in some cells, and this sunlight is used to synthesize special molecules, and the energy of the sunlight can also be stored, that can be stored in a battery like form. How it is stored? By the process of transfer of the ions across a membrane, that is, there is some charge gradient and the energy is stored in chemical energy form, and this particular energy is used to synthesis sugar, that is glucose type of molecules, and other types of biomolecules, including proteins, lipids, and nucleic acid. At least 4 key kinds of energy are relevant in biological systems. So what are these 4 key kinds of energy? Chemical energy, mechanical energy, electromagnetic energy, and thermal energy. These are 4 kinds of energy. Each of these forms of energy may be converted by living organisms into each of the others, with the interesting and important exception that thermal energy is generally a dead end, since harnessing thermal motions to carry out useful work is prohibited. So from the second law of thermodynamics, we know that we cannot convert all the heat into the useful thermal energy. There is degradation of heat. So that is why we say in this way, that is, there is an important exception that thermal energy is generally a dead end. For example, electromagnetic energy in the form of a photon from the sun can be harnessed by a cell during photosynthesis to generate chemical energy that may be used for metabolic processes. We already elaborated that fact, that is how sunlight is used to synthesize different types of biomolecules. Conversely, fireflies and other bioluminescent organisms convert chemical energy into photons. So, in the first process, that is in the photosynthesis process, the electromagnetic energy is converted to the chemical energy, and this chemical energy is used for metabolic processes, that is for the synthesis of the biomolecules. But in the fireflies, what happens, that is the stored chemical energy again converts that chemical energy into the photons. Energy gathered by organisms from their environments can be stored for later use, primarily in chemical form. So, which we have already said, that is this particular energy can be stored. Energy storing molecules are used by all organisms for a host of important cellular processes. So, there are some energy storing molecules. For example, ATP. ATP is one of its kind. ATP is used to pump molecules across membranes to create the specialized polymeric apparatus of cellular motility and to power the motors that allow our muscles to contract. So, ATP is such types of molecule which is used for storing the chemical energy. We will often make an explicit or implicit assumptions that the system is operating close to equilibrium. So, when we are talking about this particular energy, when we are talking about calculation of energy for making a particular cell, then we need some assumption. So, what is that assumption? The assumption is that the system which we are talking about, that is that particular biological system, that system is close to the equilibrium, such that any small excursion of the system will typically result in it returning to its original state. How do we reconcile the mathematically convenient equilibrium assumption with the real world observation that biological systems are constantly dynamic and changing? But the practical fact is that we know that biological systems are dynamic in nature. There are different types of cellular dynamics. That means the systems are constantly changing. So, how the assumption of equilibrium will be valid? The key insight is that different processes occur at different time scales. So, in one of my lecture, we have learned about the time scales of different biological processes. So, there what we have learned, that is different biological processes are performed at different time scales, and so we can frequently isolate some small part of a biological process occurring at a relatively rapid time scale and pretend that it is at equilibrium with respect to its effects on processes that occur more slowly. So, we are doing two types of things, that is first isolating one biological process. There are different types of biological process. So, we are isolating a small part of the biological process that is occurring at a relatively rapid time scale, and we are comparing this biological process with other processes, the other processes that occur more slowly. So, in this way, that is by the way of comparison, we are saying that is a particular biological process is in equilibrium. Now, we will learn about some deterministic and thermal forces. One of the important characteristics of the cellular interior that makes it so different from the world of our everyday experience is the fact that thermal and deterministic forces are on an equal footing. So, how it is so, that I will discuss step by step. By thermal forces, we refer to the forces exerted on macromolecular structure as a result of the incessant jiggling of all the molecules, such as water, that surround them. When we are considering the transformation that a biological system can undergo, it is useful to picture the range of available possibilities in terms of an energy landscape. For example, a protein may exist in a large number of possible conformations, but some will be energetically preferred over the others. So, what we said, that is, when we are talking about the thermal forces, so we have described the thermal forces with the random motion of the molecules, because heat energy when it is applied to a system, so what happens, the molecules perform random motion. We have learned about the Brownian motion in our thermodynamics classes. So heat actually, when given to a particular system, so that in that system the molecules are in random motion. But apart from this random behavior of the molecules, there are some particular facts which is non-random. They are deterministic in nature. For example, a protein may exist in a large number of possible conformations, that is, these possible conformations may be random. But what happens in practice, that is, some of the conformations are energetically favorable with respect to the others. That is, there is some deterministic structure of the proteins. In any given biological system, the shape of the peaks and valleys on the free energy landscapes can be changed by an energy input. For example, mechanical stretching of a membrane containing an ion channel will tend to make the open conformation of the channel more favorable relative to the closed conformation. So we know, that is, if you consider an ion channel, we will talk about the ion channel in some later lectures in more details. So if you consider an ion channel, so and suppose you are stretching a membrane, and that particular membrane contains several ion channels. So what will happen in that case, that is, due to the act of the stretching, open conformation of the channels will be more favorable than the closed conformation. So there is also some types of deterministic nature. So the thing is that there is both random type of nature and also some deterministic type of nature in biological systems. At the same time, the rates at which molecules explore the energy landscape tend to be primarily determined by thermal forces. These different effects can be quantitatively related to one another through the use of common units. Thermal jostling of particles must be accounted for in biological systems. Perhaps the most famed example of thermal effects is that of Brownian motion. We all read about the Brownian motion. The Brownian motion is the microscopic basis of the diffusion process, and we have learned about the diffusion process in our thermodynamics classes. And there what we have learned, that is, observation of small particles of the order of 1 micrometer, fluorescently labeled molecules and even macromolecules within cells reveals that the fact that they suffer excursions that are to all appearances completely random. That is, the motion of the macromolecules, fluorescently labeled molecules, or any other types of small particles of the dimension 1 micrometer. So these molecules perform the random type of motion or the diffusive type of motion. This jostling is a reflection of the fact that in addition to whatever deterministic forces might be applied to the particle or molecule of interest, such as electrostatic interaction, attachment to springs, etc., they are also subjected to forces due to constant collisions with the molecules that make up the surrounding medium, which in turn constantly collide with one another. That means there are a huge number of small particles in a cell. There are also huge number of macromolecules. They all are in thermal motion and they collide with each other. So there are two types of motion. The first one is the random motion, and the second fact that we have discussed a little bit earlier, that is there is some deterministic nature also in some types of motion. To get a sense of the relative importance of thermal and deterministic forces, we need a numerical measure of the contribution of thermal effects. One way to compare the thermal and deterministic scales is through ratios of the form E deterministic divided by KBT. So E DET det, we have used DET det in subscript form. So E det is the energy corresponding to the deterministic force, and KBT, this particular energy, is for the thermal energy. E dt represents the scale of deterministic energies in the problem of interest. For example, we might ask for the energy scale associated with breaking a hydrogen bond, or the energy cost of bending a DNA molecule. And later we will show that the probability of a given microstate of a system is proportional to the Boltzmann factor e to the power minus E deterministic by Kb into T, revealing the quantitative interplay of thermal and deterministic energies. So in cells, what happens actually, there is a interplay of the deterministic energy and the thermal energy. The natural energy unit for a single molecule inside a cell is set by the thermal energy scale at room temperature, namely KBT, that is KBT corresponds to the thermal energy, and you see that the value of the KBT will be 4.1 piconewton nanometer. This is the natural energy unit for a single molecule inside a cell set by the thermal energy scale. So you just look at this term, that is, this is for the thermal energy scale. So if you consider the thermal energy scale, then KBT will be 4.1 piconewton nanometer. We can see that this energy scale will be of central importance to the life and times of macromolecules such as sugars, lipids, proteins and nucleic acids, because the energy delivered by ATP hydrolysis is tens of KBT, and many of the motors that perform the functions of the cell exert piconewton forces over nanometer length scale, and as they exert piconewton forces over nanometer length scale, that is why we have used that particular unit of the KBT as piconewton into nanometer. So that is the reason behind it. For other kinds of biological transformations, it is sometimes more useful to consider the thermal scale in some different types of units. For example, for biochemical reactions, we use the value of KBT is of the order of 0.6 kilocalorie per mole or 2.5 kilojoule per mole. And when considering thermal motions of the charge, in that case, we will use the value of KBT of the order of 25 milli electron volt. So depending upon the biological processes, sometimes the value and the units of the KBT is different. These ideas on the relative importance of thermal and deterministic forces are made more concrete in figure 5.1. Now you just look at this figure. So what we have earlier described, that is two types of forces are there, thermal force and some deterministic force. Now in a particular graph we can plot those forces or those forms of the energy. So you see, that is, in the horizontal axis of the graph it is length in the unit of meter, and in the vertical axis it has been shown the value of energy in joule. And you see the scales of the energy, it is from 10 to the power minus 30 to 10 to the power 10, whereas when length is considered, the range of the length is of the order of 10 to the power minus 15 to 1. So and you look, the unit is meter, and for energy the unit is joule. Now this horizontal line in red color, that represents the thermal energy. So you see that thermal energy is random at its value does not depend on the length. So this is the value of the thermal energy. Now some lines are drawn in this graph, and a particular line represents a particular kind of energy. For example, if you consider this line, so this line is the electronic binding energy of a box, and if you consider this line, so this line is the energy for a fracture of a 20:1 rod, and this particular line is the energy required for the bending of a 20:1 rod, and this particular line that corresponds to the electrostatic energy of a spherical shell. And apart from these lines there are some dots. For example, this is the dot, and this represents the energy corresponding to the chemical bonds. This is nuclear energy, and this is energy for a proton. These are dots because the length scale associated for those energy is very small. They operates in a small length scale, that is why they have been represented by some dots. Energy as a function of length scale for a number of different energetic mechanisms plotted in this graph. The graph shows how thermal, chemical, mechanical and electrostatic energies associated with an object scale with the size of the object. So that means as we are changing the length scale, so energies are also changing. As the characteristic object size approaches that of biological macromolecule, all of the energy scales converge to a single regime. So this is the most important fact what we can see from this particular graph. So I am again repeating it, that is, as the characteristic object size approaches that of a biological molecule. So what is the size? Size is of the order of nanometer, 10 to the power minus 9 meter. You see all the lines including the thermal energy, all the lines and this particular dot, that is that corresponds to the chemical bonds, they all are coming closer. In this particular portion they all merge together when the scale is of the order of nanometer, that is the size of the biological macromolecule. The horizontal line shows the thermal energy scale. The bending energy is estimated by considering an elastic rod with an aspect ratio of 20:1 that is bent into a semicircular arc. So this is for the bending of a rod. The electrostatic energy is estimated for a model spherical protein with polar residues on its surface. So this particular, that is sphere, is the protein sphere, and we are assuming that is there are some polar residues, that is there are some charges outside the sphere. With polar residues on its surface, and for which all of the polar residues are stripped of a single charge. So energy needed for stripping of a single charge, that has been shown in this diagram. Chemical energy as a function of length or binding energy is estimated approximately by considering the effects of confining a free electron in a box of that length scale. So we are assuming that is a free electron is confined in a box, and if you vary the size of the box, that means you are varying the length scale, then energy will be varied in this manner. So this is what about the binding energy. For comparison, measured binding energies are shown for 3 chemical bonds. So here the binding energy has been shown for 3 types of chemical bonds: hydrogen bond, phosphate groups in ATP, and covalent bonds. So all these log-log scale, on this log-log scale of protein, they all appear very similar to one another at the point of convergence. Point of convergence means in this particular region all forms of energy are comparable. So the fact is that these ideas on the relative importance of thermal and deterministic forces are made more concrete in the above figure that we have just described. The horizontal line in the figure corresponds to the thermal energy scale, represented as kBT is equal to 4.1 into 10 to the power minus 21 joule. So this is the typical value of the thermal energy, which is shown in this particular graph. The other lines illustrate the energy cost associated with particular deterministic scenarios, such as stripping a fraction of the charge of the spheres of different size. So if you want to strip off some charge from the sphere of different size, then this type of line you will obtain. So this is one type of deterministic force, and we have shown that in the graph. Similarly, if you bend rods of different size, then you can also show a particular graph. So similarly, suppose you are confining electrons in boxes of different size, which conveys a feeling for the energy scale of binding. So this particular binding energy curve is shown here. The key point of the figure is to note that at the nanometer scale, precisely the scale of the macromolecules of the cell, thermal energies and all the deterministic energies of properties like charge rearrangement, bonding, molecular rearrangement are comparable, unlike at the familiar centimeter or meter scale. But this phenomena, that is this convergence, does not happen if you increase the length scale. That is, suppose we are going to the meter order. This is the meter order, 1 meter. You see this point is 1 meter. So there is no convergence, rather there is divergence. So when the length scale is comparable to the scale of the biomolecules, that is in the nanometer scale, there is convergence of the deterministic force and thermal force. Because each of these forms of energy is of comparable scale and effectively interchangeable at the molecular level, a living organism that needs to generate motion, heat, electricity and biomolecular synthesis is expert at energetic interconversions. So in the beginning of the lecture we said, that is, there is the interconversion of different forms of the energy inside a cell. So we have talked about different types of energy: thermal energy, chemical energy, electromagnetic energy, etc. So there is interconversion between these types of energy. But why there is the interconversion? What is the basic reason behind that? So this is basically, that is, the energy scale of the thermal force and the deterministic force are comparable at the molecular level. That is the reason behind it, that we have explained in that graph. That is why there is energetic interconversions inside the cells. For the most part, energy used by living cells is derived from chemical energy in food and used to generate all the other forms. So at first chemical energy is created from the food, then This particular chemical energy is used to generate all the other forms of the energy. An interesting exception is photosynthesis, where electromagnetic energy is first converted into the chemical energy, and then chemical energy is converted to the other forms of the energy. So in this way there is interconversion of the energy inside the cells. I hope you have understood the main points of this lecture. This particular content has been taken from the textbook Physical Biology of the Cell, written by Rob Phillips and others. I request the viewers to go through this textbook for further understanding regarding the topic, and I thank you all for listening the lecture.